So I'm looking at week 3 of what the ways of God in terms of discipleship. And have you gone? It should be the picture that comes up first, the one before that. That'll do. So the first week we was talking about being a disciple, and that was following after Jesus. Next week we was talking about our lives being changed by him, and well, not last week, the week before, about taking up our cross and following him. This week I wanted to speak about the mission, joining the mission of Jesus. Put the next one on, please. So what is his mission? Let me just explain there. You see, look at that. Oh, it's gone again. That slide doesn't want to stay. Oh, it's coming again. Come and go. So you see, follow, change, the mission of Jesus. Matthew 28, verse 19. I've read this before. Matthew 20. This is the mission of Jesus. And this is what he's commissioned the disciples with and us. All authority. There we go. Not in part. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am always with you, even to the end of the age. Now let's go to Mark. It's not on a slide there, Danny, but Mark. The end of Mark is when the same thing is said, but it's been captured by Mark, not Matthew. Mark chapter 16, verse 15. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will follow. Oh, here we go. These signs will follow those who believe. In my name they will cast out demons. They will speak with new tongues. They will take up serpents. If they drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt them. They will lay hands on the sick and they will recover. Do we believe it?
Amen.
What did he say there in verse 17? These signs will follow those who believe. He doesn't say these signs go before you. He says those signs follow those who believe. So if you don't believe, there won't be any signs following you. But if you do believe, the signs will follow you. Which means they come after you. Which means the signs are dependent upon your obedience to what God is telling you to do. So Steve is ill. He's in Aldi. I'm in Aldi. I see him walking. God says, go and pray for him. No. Well, you know what? There ain't no sign or wonder going to follow me, is there? Because I don't believe. God says, go and pray for Steve. Yeah, but he may think I'm an idiot. He thinks that anyway. Let's just go to him and let's just pray for him. Excuse me, sir. I've just noticed he looks like you're in pain. Can I pray for you? My experience, very few people say no. Actually, we're the ones who get nervous, but very few people actually say no. You believe in God. Now, your neck is on the line. I'm going to lay hands on him. He says there, I'll lay hands on him, they will recover. I'll lay hands on Steve. I pray for God to touch him and heal him. These signs will follow those who believe. So I've got to do something first for the sign to follow me. We've been sold a lie by people that we just think signs will, how on earth will a sign happen if we don't do something first? Oh, we expect all these miracles. Well, who did it? Who laid hands on that sick person? The mission of Jesus. These signs will follow those who believe. In my name, they will cast out demons. Now, it's fun when that happens. It may scare you, but it's fun when that does happen. They will speak with, you don't look convinced, but it is fun. They will speak because it's not your authority. They're not responding to you. They're responding to the name of Jesus. Yeah. So when they have a dicky fit in front of you, tendency for some people would be, oh, let's quieten them down and let's, oh, you're too harsh. No, that person needs to be set free. Now, in this politically correct nation, that's going to be interesting when demons start to manifest. Because everyone's going to be saying, oh, you're too harsh, you're too nasty, you're too rude. And here we go again. Typical Christians will start the criticising as they do. And churches will back off so they don't get criticised. And what they're doing, they're backing off from the signs and the wonders that God has commissioned us to live with. It's very true. They will take up serpents. They will drink, if you drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt you. You lay hands on the sick and they will recover. That's our mission. Now, I've said this. A disciple, I don't know if I put that on there, but a disciple is a learner. Someone, and again, just flip, who follows a master teacher, who copies a teacher's life, who follows another, who is baptized and is willing to take upon him or herself the name of their Saviour and follow him. That's what a disciple is. Next one. What is the mission? What does mission mean? When this is written in my book, The Great Commission, the mission of Jesus that is given to us. A mission is an important assignment given to a person or group of people. So that mission of Jesus, when he says, go into all the world and preach the gospel, is for every single person in this room. Lay hands on the sick, they will recover. It's for every single person in this room. If you drink anything deadly, it won't hurt you. If you can pick up a snake, it won't hurt you. But if you believe, these signs will follow those who believe. You will cast out demons, you will speak with new tongues. That's the mission for every single person who follows Jesus. That's what he says. That is the mission. It's an assignment that's been given to a people, a person, or a group of people. Take it either way. The person is you individually, or the group of people would be the ecclesia, the church, the called out ones. Those people who've been called out of the world because they're born again to do this. So we have been commissioned by God to do this everywhere we go. Now, this is going to be the interesting part. A pastor and a leader should always lead by example. Okay? So it's not a case of, oh, I've got to make sure I get this right. Don't do as I do, do as I say. Because some pastors are great at that. They'll tell you to do things, but they don't do it themselves. So I'm going to get all you guys to pray, and I'm going for a walk. And in fact, I'm going to go and have a meal while you guys are praying. No, I'll be there praying myself. Now, if Jesus was a good leader, and we're talking about discipling, yeah? And he's given the disciples, and he's given us a mission to follow. If Jesus is worth his salt, he would be a good discipler, wouldn't he? Yeah? Because we follow him. We copy his example. So if he can't disciple people, and if his disciples haven't got a clue what they're doing, and they fail and mess up continually and then achieve nothing, he hasn't done a very good job. Okay? Now, the interesting thing when it comes to being a disciple, a follower of Jesus, is that it's down to people's free will. You can choose to follow him, or you can choose not to follow him. I want to look at the 12 disciples this morning in the time that I've got, which isn't very long. And I want to take the 12 disciples to show you how Jesus discipled them, what he did, what they did, where they went, what they achieved, when they died, how they died. Every single one of them, of the 12. Okay? And I want to go through them because I want to show you that we are disciples of Jesus. So we are following him, and through following him, he wants us to complete the mission of going into all the world, laying hands on the sick, discipling people. He wants us to do that. But I want to look at his example because he did it first. Yeah. What did he do? And what were the outcome of the 12 that he discipled? Yeah. That makes sense? Yes. Yeah. Now, let's go to Matthew 4. And I'm going to show you, to begin with, just two of the disciples and what they did to Jesus calling them. Now, this comes after Jesus was tempted. Okay? Now, actually, Jenny's speaking next week. I'm speaking the week after. The week after, I'm speaking about the temptation of Jesus. Okay? But that's just beside the point. But I'm looking at Matthew 4, verse 18. This is where Jesus called Peter and Andrew. Okay? The first two disciples. And this is what he said. Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Forget this fisher then rubbish, guys. They were fishermen, okay? M-E-N. Some of you won't know what that means. Some of you will. But they're fishermen. Then he said to them, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. And immediately they left their nets and followed him. They didn't think about it. They didn't debate it. They didn't question it. They just said immediately they left their profession and said, okay, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to follow you. In John chapter 15 verse 8, he says there that if you are a true disciple of Jesus, you will bear much fruit. Okay? If you bear much fruit, you are a disciple. That's how people will know that you're a disciple of him. So I want to see whether these disciples did bear fruit or not. Because if they didn't, they're not disciples. They're not followers. And that's our thing. I look at you and I look at myself. If we are not bearing fruit, then we are failing as followers of Jesus. He's not following. He's not failing. We are failing to follow correctly. Luke 14, verse 27. These are all the verses we don't want to read. He says, whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Spoke about that. Then he says, there's a cost to pay to follow me properly. And in this day and age where we live, not everybody is willing to take up their cross. And I don't mean be full of self-pity. I don't mean, my Achilles heel is my cross. I have to bear that every day when I walk. No, he's not talking, I said this last week, he's not talking about that. He's talking about, are we willing to die to ourselves in order to follow him properly? Matthew shows us there that Peter and Andrew were called by Jesus, and immediately, I love those people, okay? When you make an appeal, and there's always one person who comes down the front before you've finished. And then you get all the hangers on, you can't make up the mind. Oh, do I or don't I? And you think, guys, if you do, you do. If I had £1 million sat there and says, first one, help yourself, some of you wouldn't get there quick enough, would you? But when we say about being a follower of Jesus, then, I don't know. I have to think about that. I want to go through the 12 disciples. And I'm going to read from Matthew 10, verse 1 to 15. And you'll be surprised who is included in the list of disciples. In fact, I mentioned this to someone this week, and I didn't even know who the person was. I won't say who that was, Kath. Sorry. And when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out, to heal, guys, listen, to heal all kinds of sicknesses and all kinds of diseases. We're his disciples. We have got that same power over unclean spirits to cast them out, to heal all kinds of sickness and disease. Now here's the 12. Now the names of the 12 apostles, disciples are these. First, Simon, called Peter, Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, boing boing, John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus, Lebbaeus, who on earth see? I've never heard of him. Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, who's actually Jude, who wrote the book of Jude. Okay? Same person. Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus. I have no idea if I'm saying that correct, but anyway. Simon the Canaanite, who is sometimes called Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out, commanding them, do not go into the way of the Gentiles, do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as ye go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead. See, everywhere we read, Jesus keeps saying the same thing. See, I'm not, again, I woke up with this striving thing in my head. I'm not striving for any of these things. But let me tell you, if we're not doing these things, then we are living short of what Jesus has said for us to do. And sometimes, for those who've got children, and I'm sure Janet will find this out as Josiah gets a bit older, you've got to leave the house at 10 o'clock. You tell your kids to get, in fact, I still have this issue. You tell your children to get ready. Get your coat on, get your shoes on. We've got to leave the house at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock comes, they're on the toilet. 5 to 10 comes, they've got to clean the teeth. Then they've got to get the coat on. What does the parent do? Come on! We've got to go! That's exactly what I'm doing to you. Oh, but you're being too strong. Listen, I'm telling my daughters who still do this, and my wife, I'm telling them, come on, we've got an appointment, we've got to go somewhere, we're going to miss the bus, we're going to miss the train, we're going to miss whatever we've got to do. The shop will be closed. We need to leave. Somebody has to put a stick of dynamite up their rear end to get them going. And you know what, it's no different in church. Because I'm looking at somebody who's like, oh, my balance is gone. Get lost, man. We've got to. Some of us got to have a Holy Ghost stick of dynamite up us to get us motivated to say, come on, I can pray for these people who are sick. I can pray for them and God will heal them. I can lay hands on people and they will recover. And you know why I keep saying it? Because some of you have got it and some of you haven't. Some of you are getting it. Some of you are thinking, oh, perhaps I need to. Perhaps, and it's starting to challenge you a little bit. But some of you haven't got it yet. And I'm going to keep saying it until you've got it. Why do I know you haven't got it? Because I don't see you do it. We only know it when we do it. Or we only do it when we know it. It's true. It is 100% true. Talk to anyone out there and they'll say the same thing. A person who knows it will do it. So I will keep banging the drum and say, guys, God wants to do something here. God is doing something. Yeah. You and I can lay hands on the sick. It's not down to my job to do it. It's down to you. Why did I get Steve, Sheila, Jenny, Steve, Kath, whoever to pray for people? Yeah, I could lay hands on them. Of course I can. But let other people do it. Let other people do it. As you go, preach, say, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the leper, raise the dead. And that's only for the church, isn't it? Raise the dead. Cast out demons. Freely you've received, freely you give. Provide neither gold or silver nor copper in your money belt, nor a bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staff, for a worker is worthy of his food. For whoever will not receive you nor your words, when shake your dust off from your feet. It will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city, or I'm going to say that person. Because we think sometimes, that person, they're mature. You know what? The maturity is shown by their behaviour. Your maturity is shown by your behaviour and your attitude. So when someone throws the toys out of the cot, you think, not to judge, but you just think, there's an area where they've got to grow. And that's for everybody. I'm not picking on anybody, okay? Please don't start that one. I'm not picking on anyone. But we know that people understand it and have got a revelation of it when we start to see the fruit of it in their life. Yes, what's important. So the disciples. I'm going to start with Peter. Okay? Now bear in mind, these guys are uneducated people on the main. Normal people. Nothing special about them. But God said, come and follow me. And he discipled them. And the key was, immediately Peter and Andrew left the boat. They were willing to be discipled. And because they were willing, they became significant people. Yeah? Why was Billy Graham a significant man in the world? Because he was willing to follow Jesus and fulfill the assignment that God had given him. We're scared that, if I follow Jesus, I'm going to lose my job. I never said that. If I follow Jesus, I'm going to lose relations. I've never said that. But sometimes it may cost you relationships because you are growing in a different direction to where they are. Anyway, Peter. This is not on the screen because I didn't want you to read it. I wanted you to listen to me. So Peter, and listen to this for Peter. He was the first to be called by Jesus. He was the first disciple to whom Jesus appeared after the resurrection. Bear in mind that he'd betrayed Jesus 3 times, and yet Jesus appeared to him, the first of the disciples. He was the first to see the risen Lord, and he was the first to to enter the empty tomb to see if Jesus was actually there or not. He was told, but he still wanted to go and check. He was the first of the disciples, the 12, to go in there and have a look. He wrote the book of 1st and 2nd Peter that we know, and he was the first leader of the early church. He was the founder of the church in Antioch, the founder of the church in Jerusalem, and the founder of the church in Rome. Rome was the centre of the then known world, the major player in the world. This is Peter, big mouth Peter, that we always have to put our finger, oh, Peter. But look what God did through him. God took him. Peter, James and John were the closest to Jesus of the 12. And he served, now this is one for the Catholics, he served as the first bishop in the early church in Rome. That confuses people, especially Pentecostals, and when they whinge about the Catholic people. He served as the first bishop in the early church in Rome, and he was crucified in Rome under Emperor Nero in AD 67. Interesting, because the Apostle Paul was also killed by Emperor Nero in Rome in AD 67. So the devil thinks, look, I've taken the two main players out here. I've taken out Peter, I've taken out Paul. One is an apostle to the Jews, one is an apostle to the Gentiles. I've taken them out. The church is finished. Think of it. Think of the strategy that the enemy is using. We don't think of that. We just, well. But he tried to take out the two main men. He was martyred where Paul was martyred, and he was crucified upside down because he said he was unworthy to die the same way Jesus did. And actually, the place where he died is recorded as being on Vatican Hill in Rome. Again, that confuses the Catholics, doesn't it? Or he is on Vatican Hill in Rome. That's what I say. He was buried where now St. Peter's Basilica is now built. And actually, in the 1960s, they did an archaeological dig under that basilica. And they found a male body who was around the 60 years of age mark, who they say through the things that they do, archaeologists do, that he would have been crucified around AD 67. Now, they're not saying it's Peter, but join the dots. He was crucified in that place, he's the right age, at the right time. It all matches. It could be Peter, they don't know. But bear in mind, Peter was a fisherman, no education, outspoken, but he was passionate for God. Yeah. Passionate for God. You know what? Peter would have offended half the church if he was here. Oh, don't like that, Peter. How dare you be like that? Oh, no. I'm leaving. Shut the door. Please, it's drafting. We would have, because that's what would have happened. But God took his personality, God took his character, and sometimes we've got to look beyond that and just say, you know what? There's an anointing on that person for a reason to do something that nobody else is going to do. There weren't many Peters, there was one. The first. Passionate man. Rough around the edges. But you know what? God didn't say, well, you failed. Now let's take Andrew, Peter's brother. Andrew. Now, believe it or not, Peter was the first to be called by Jesus, but Andrew was the first to respond. He said Andrew was the first to respond to Jesus. He was the first to follow. And it states, if you research it, that he was the older brother of Peter. And he was a very good-natured, curious individual, born in the village of Bethesda by the Sea of Galilee. And when we read the story of the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, Andrew was the disciple that brought the 5 loaves and 2 fishes to Jesus. Andrew was that guy. Apart from that, you don't hear much about him. But this is what he did. Andrew converted many to Christ throughout the Mediterranean region, including the wife of a Roman provincial governor in Greece. That guy, her husband, the governor, wasn't happy, so he ordered Andrew to be whipped and then crucified. And he was whipped by 7 soldiers, as it's written, tied to a cross. And as they whipped him and tied him to a cross to crucify him, history says that if you research a lot of historical books, he saluted the crowd. and said, let me get this correct, I have long desired this happy hour, when they're just about to crucify him. I've waited for this. I count this as a privilege. Jesus died, I'm going to, for the cause of Jesus Christ. And whilst he was on the cross, he continued to preach. They couldn't shut him up. He still carried on preaching until he drew his last breath. Man, we need some of those people in the church. But you know what? And I'm going to say it again. The church wouldn't like it. Because there's a lot of religious churches out there. And when someone comes along who's outspoken, who says it as it is, it upsets all the religious devils, and they start to work in people. It's true. It's very true. Now, James, the third disciple. James, he's the son of Zebedee. He's also called James the Great. It gets a little bit confusing here because there's a James the Great, a James the Just, and a James the Less, and a James the brother of Jesus. So it gets a little bit confusing which one's which. But this one of the apostles, is James the son of Zebedee, and he is often called as James the Great. He's the elder brother of John. Now, it's interesting because we know that John was called the beloved disciple, don't we? Or lovey-dovey. And yet James and John were called the sons of thunder because they kept arguing. How's that one work? If they were James and John were sons of thunder, and yet John was supposed to be the beloved disciple, what does that show you? Two brothers didn't get on. There was actually, think of your family. That's what I'm getting at. Think of your family. God will call people even if there's a tension in the family. God will still call people. So you may not like your brother or your sister or your mom or your dad or your auntie or your whatever. But you know what? God could still call them, and they're still going to serve God. And yet John was a beloved disciple, yet he's also called the sons of thunder. Interesting. It's interesting. They were called the sons of thunder. Their relationship between. Now, James was actually the first one to be martyred in AD 44. 44 years after Jesus died. And he was beheaded in Jerusalem, stabbed with a spear by Herod Agrippa. And yet look where he went. He was discipled by Jesus for those years, and yet his mission field, go ye into all the world, was Spain. He was buried in Spain. And yet his accuser was converted and became, because of James's courage, and they were both martyred together. So the story goes that a Roman officer guarded James and watched him when James was under trial defending his faith. He escorted James to be executed, but as he was escorting him, he was convicted so much that he knelt down beside James and gave his life to Jesus. And then the two were crucified together. Wow. He could have waited until James died and then said, I'm going to do this because that way I've avoided being crucified with James. That's what we would have thought. That's a clever idea, isn't it? But he said no. He was that convicted and that hungry that he said, I'm accepting Jesus, and if you kill me with him, so be it. I'm going. They love their life, not unto death. Then there's James, the son of Alphaeus. He is James the Less. Okay? Brother of Andrew. Some say he was thrown off the pinnacle of the temple and then beaten to death with a club in Jerusalem in AD 62. Tradition says, I've skipped, I'm not going in order by the way, so I'm confused. James, the son of Alphaeus. He was thrown off the pinnacle of the temple. Which temple? The same temple where the devil came to tempt Jesus. That same temple where Satan said to Jesus, go on then, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself off the temple. That same place. That's where James, the son of Alphaeus, was thrown off the temple, then beaten to death. Well, beaten, and then he survived all that, so then they crucified him. Tradition says that he was crucified in Lower Egypt. So that's where his mission field was, Lower Egypt, in North Africa. Now we'll go back to John, the son of Zebedee. I did the two James together because I got confused. I had to make sure I got the right James here. Now, John, the son of Zebedee, we know him as a beloved disciple, known as John the Evangelist or John the Elder, and he's the youngest of all the disciples, born in AD 11. Now think, AD 11 years after Christ was born. He's a young lad. He died in AD 99, aged 88 years of age, or so they say. Why do I say that? Apparently he was boiled in a basin of oil and then sentenced to the mines on the Isle of Patmos. That's where he wrote the book of Revelation. But he survived the oil, the vat of oil being boiled. He was sentenced to work in the mines in Patmos, where Revelation was written. And then he was released. And when he released, he went to work in Ephesus and modern-day Turkey. Some will say that he died that way, that he was beaten. Some say he never died at all. And he just went to heaven and God took him. If you research it, there are two opinions, and they both say there's evidence for both. So I'm not going to be biased. I'm just going to tell you both. That's what it says out there. Some say he was beaten and he died. Others say he was not well because he'd been boiled in a vat of hot oil. Sent to work in the mines. He went to carry on evangelizing, and then God took him. Oh, I like that. Not the oil bit, but God taking me. Then we got Philip, born in AD 4. Interesting, none of these were born when Jesus was born. They were born after. They were young men. AD 4, he was born in Bethesda. He died AD 80, 76. And he was the one who distributed the bread and the fish to the 5,000 people. He ministered to the Gentiles. And he ministered in Greece, Spain, and Phrygia. And Philip was known for his healing and his evangelism. Philip did the majority of healing and evangelism at the time that he was preaching. And again, one of the wives of the leaders where he was working was converted. And as a result, he was crucified. And to make sure, they beheaded him. How vile some of these things are. And yet, again, history records that whilst on the cross, he continued to preach Jesus. He wouldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. He was also crucified like Peter, upside down. And he's buried in what is called the Basilica di Santa in Rome. And apparently there are relics of Philip in the crypt in that basilica in Rome. Next one, Bartholomew. Born AD 1. Died AD 69, and he went to work, ministered in India, Mesopotamia, Parthia, Ethiopia, and Armenia. That's where Bartholomew went. Bartholomew was also called Nathaniel, another name. But Bartholomew's mission was interesting because the majority of his work, he worked with royalty. So he did a lot of work with royal families in different nations. That's quite cool, isn't it? Going to hobnob with all the royal folk. And yet, he was a church planter. Wherever he went, he would plant churches. And this is interesting for you, Richard, from what you said on Friday night. Wakey. I'm kidding. One of the churches that he started still existed until 1936. One of the churches that he started. And it was destroyed only because the Russians demolished it because they had a campaign against religion. 1936, that his church that he's planted was still going. Now that's a bit of a successful church plant, isn't it? You know what I mean? 1936, it was still going. There were 3 accounts of how Bartholomew died. Some say he was kidnapped, beaten, and then thrown into the sea, and he drowned. Someone said, there's another writer that said he was crucified upside down with Philip. And then another one said he was skinned alive and beheaded in Turkey. Now, do whatever you want, whether it's any of them, beaten and drowned in the sea, crucified upside down, or skinned alive and beheaded. Not pleasant. Thomas, he's also called Didymus, and he's that famous disciple for doubting Jesus, doubting his resurrection. But if you research again, he did confess Christ as his Saviour, and he followed him, and he worked the majority of his time in India and China. Died AD 72, and he was killed by a spear in Chennai. Or for those who don't realise, Chennai is Madras in India, because they've changed a lot of the names. So he was killed with a spear in Chennai in Madras. Matthew, the tax collector, was born in Nazareth, brother to James. His ministry was Jerusalem and Judea, and he died in AD 60 in Turkey by being staked and speared to the ground. So he was held down by stakes, and then they speared him to kill him. Lebbaeus, whose name was Thaddeus, who was changed his name to Jude, was born in Galilee, was a Roman, and he wrote the book of Jude. And he was martyred by being beaten with a club and crucified in AD 72 in Turkey, when he was on his way back from a missionary trip to Iran. Wow. We know what the Iranians are like. And yet Jude was a martyr in AD 72 on his way back. He'd been on a missionary trip to Iran, coming home, killed in Turkey. Judas Iscariot, we know him, betrayed Jesus. And then Simon the Zealot. He also ministered in Egypt. He joined Jude, and he worked with Jude as a team. So you don't hear of any other disciple working in a team with anybody else. Bars, Simon and Jude, they worked together, and they spent their time in Iran, Armenia, and Lebanon. And he was martyred AD 65, and again, some say he was sawn in half. And I don't mean across, I mean head to toe, sawn in half. And then actually, if I have to be slightly more gruesome, it wasn't head first, it was from the bottom end first. So let's go to Revelation chapter 12. I'm nearly finished. Why I've said them is not to scare you or upset you, but it's just to show you that for Jesus to be a successful leader, he discipled those men, and they truly were followers of him. Yeah? They were followers of him. And I want to read Revelation 12, verse 11, that we always read, but we always fail to read the last little bit. They overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and that they didn't and they did not love their lives to the death. Well, I can't do that, it's raining. I can't do that, I've got to be haircut. I can't do that. And yeah, he says here that every one of those disciples, but they decided they were early. No, don't even start quoting that religious stuff at me. You and I are called disciples, just like they were called disciples. They were called as followers of Jesus. He calls us as followers of Jesus. We have just got into a pattern of behaviour and a society where we avoid things and we don't really. Anyone who's outspoken in his politically correct nation gets shot down. Anyone who makes a stand gets shot down. How dare you say those things? Because you want everything to be fluffy and no one to offend and upset anybody, so the truth gets ignored and pushed to one side. God give us some politicians who are going to stand up and tell the truth for what it is. Because I'll tell you, they're going to upset the apple cart in this nation, and I can't wait. They really are. They're going to upset everybody because of the way, and we don't see it at times, that spirit across the UK, where we've all got to be just have it nice. No one can say anything to anybody, you know. They were discussing on telly, excuse. There was a conversation I saw. I don't watch telly. I was with Anne, we haven't watched telly for ages. I heard this report, two people arguing, and they say, it's not politically correct to say you're fat anymore. I thought, well, this is an interesting one. It says, you can say a person's large, but you can't say fat. And anyway, the conversation, and it was pathetic, really. Now, I'm not saying I'd walk up to anybody and say they were fat or large. That's not the point. The point is, everything has to be so watered down that we can't say anything to anybody because someone may get upset. And you know what? What does the Bible say to you? Do not be offended. That's what he says to you. Offences will come, but don't be offended. We don't like that. Because we like, oh, you offended me, you offended me, you offended me, you offended me. And we always like to put the blame on them to justify us losing our temper and getting angry. And yet the Bible does say, don't be offended. So I also understand that he says to speak the truth in love. And I also know he says for us not to be offensive to people in our behaviour. But you can't have one without the other, so don't misquote it and quote that and ignore that. Because that's not what the Bible says. You can't. But everybody will use it to justify their behaviour because they know they're wrong, so they've got to find something to justify it so they can say, see, because of that, it's okay. My God, if the 12 disciples were here, how would they turn this world upside down? Yeah, my prayer this morning is God give us a group of people with the same passion as the disciples, the same desire as the disciples, the same conviction as the 12 disciples, who are willing to forsake all and follow him, who are willing to do what you wanted them to do, to go where Jesus wanted them to go, to say what he wanted them to say. Because you know what? They turned the world upside down. 12 of them turned, 11, because Judas went by the wayside. And I know they replaced him, but you don't hear much about the replacement, the substitute. The 11 turned the world upside down because of the passion and the fire of God flowing through them. And you know what? Rejection will come, and you will be hated, and you will be gossiped about, and you will be lied about, and you will have friends turn their back on you, and you will be treated unjustly, wrongly, and people will say things to try and destroy you, and people will say things to try and destroy the church. But the presence of God, the overwhelming love of God, his comfort, and his power will be ours. It will be. It will be. We can't focus on the one without the other. Don't you think that the disciples had opposition in doing what they were doing? But they carried on and they carried on. Don't you think there were thousands who didn't like them? Think of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, all those people who would say stuff and twist Jesus' words and twist what he was saying. Don't you think they were still doing the same to the disciples when Jesus had gone? Twisting what they were saying, twisting. They said, well, I never said that. I never meant it like that. But they wanted to twist it for whatever reason. People still do the same today. And we hear that. Oh, did you hear that? Guys, we've got to forget that gossip. And when we hear people doing that, we've got to shut them down and say, I don't want to hear you. I don't want to hear that. Oh, God, tell me. I'm interested. Oh, I know you want to talk to someone. Talk to me. Come on. And gossip with me. Oh, is that why? Oh, did you know that? I didn't know. Carry on. I understand. I'll keep confident. I won't tell anybody. But tell me. God, tell me. Keep going. Some of us are just say, no, I'm not interested. I don't want to hear what you've got to say. I'm really sorry, but I don't want to hear. Let's go to Hebrews 12 and I'll finish with this. My heart is that when I go to be with Jesus, he says these words to me. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've won your race, and you've won it well. A friend of mine, I met with him in a restaurant up in Lincoln about 2 weeks before he died, and I didn't know he was dying. But I walked away, and when I came home, I said to Jenny, I said, that was the most weirdest meeting I've ever had with a pastor in all my life. It appeared to me like he was saying goodbye, but he never said goodbye. 2 weeks later, he died. But he said this to me, my biggest regret is that I've let other people stop me from doing what God has wanted me to do. That's what he said to me. And we served under him for some years, and he was a good friend. And he said to me those words, sat having a bacon sandwich. I knew there's something wrong because he paid. My biggest regret is I didn't do what I believe God wanted me to do because I've let people stop me. And you know what? We've got to be careful because people stop us. People talk us out of things. People talk us out of doing certain things. And you know, we've got to serve God with all our heart. Hebrews 12, 1-3 says this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising shame, sat down at the right hand of the Father. Let me say this to you. Those people that you know who've gone before you, parents, children, family members, they are the cloud of witnesses. And I honestly believe they are watching what we do. Because it says there, since we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, we are surrounded by a great cloud. It doesn't refer to angels, it refers to people. We are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. Let's lay aside every weight. Why? When you was a kid and you were running on a athletics thing, or you were playing football, or whatever you were doing, if your parents came and cheered you on, it suddenly gave you extra energy and extra, I want to do even better than I'm doing. I want to do better. Because you got someone cheering you on. And yet we got here a cloud of witnesses. Those who've gone before us, who were cheering us on. Brothers, sisters, wives, uncles, aunties, children, parents. They're saying, I'm watching you guys. Come on, keep going, keep going. They're watching, they're cheering you on. They're cheering us on. And because they're cheering us on, you know, sometimes we get fed up, don't we? Sometimes you just get like, I've had enough. I was going to say sarcastically, it shouldn't be on camera really, every Sunday afternoon, that wouldn't be fair. That's a joke. But some people, we get fed up, we get, I've had enough of this. We get down and out. And yet we've got to encourage ourselves. There are people watching us and say, come on, Derek, keep going, my man, keep going. There were people cheering. Now, where are they? In heaven, they're watching. I do honestly believe they're people from various things. They're watching. And because they're encouraging us, put aside every weight, every sin that ensnares us, and let us run this race with endurance that is set before us. Let us keep going. Let us say, you know what, I ain't going to give up. You know, yes, I know we get down, we get, but, you know, pick yourself up and say, you know what, I'm going to encourage myself. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do what God has told me to do. I'm going to keep pushing forward. People can say what they want about me, but you know what, when I stand before God, I'm not going to be standing with them. They're going to be answerable for their own words. Jesus is just going to ask me about my life and what I've done. Well, that person said something, so I gave up. You'll be like, what'd you give up for? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. And he says, to finish, look unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Yes. Who for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He was despised with shame, and he sat down on the throne of God. His work was done. As a church, we've got to keep pushing on. Keep pushing forward, keep pushing forward. And my prayer is this, that the Father and the same Holy Spirit that was with the 12 will be with every single one of us every day of this week and every week to come, every day to come. Yeah. In everywhere we go and everything we do. That as we follow him with all our heart, that we would be people who would introduce others to him. And more than anything else, a passion, and a hunger for Christ will take over our life that blows us away. A hunger and a passion for him. You look at me sometimes, you will think I'm bonkers. I am. I'm there. I'm passionate. I'm hungry. More than you'd ever know. I watched that song yesterday. Jenny was in the lounge. I cried my eyes up. Even saying it, I'm crying. Because I'm not done until I see God change this nation.